They can hear us now. Hi, friends.
Hello.
Goku says is the best Hearthstone podcast is watched all hour. So I'm glad to live up to those lofty goals. Okay. Oh, I should open Audacity. That's a good idea.
Oh yeah. Should open up.
Yeah, it turns out podcasts are better when you record them, but you know.
I knew there was something that needed to be on the third monitor, and I was like, "What am I missing here?"
Yeah, that's my headspace lately. I'm just like, I'm just a ball of goo that goes from meeting to meeting where I'm summoned. That's basically where I am. I am a calendar Tetris grandmaster at this point. So, though I did say no to the second all-day meeting with a 15-minute lunch break in a row. The first one I agreed to, but the second one that was unscheduled until yesterday afternoon, I said no to.
416?
416,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
We found out that Leah has like a bit of a tongue tie.
Oh.
So we're gonna have a bunch of doctor's appointments to get that addressed.
Yeah. There's always something.
Had to find a pediatric dentist, which you know, but like we hadn't put her on the dental plan because like she doesn't have teeth. What do we need?
You know, there's always something, and you get that dealt with. It's like, you know, if it's not that, it's like a soft spot in the skull, or you know, or something, right? It's
for me, it was that I was born like this because I'd been squished by my brother. So I had to do baby physical therapy to get me straight, and I can still go all the way this way and only this far that way.
Yeah.
But that's very frustrating.
I got one game of that 30 card Bloodlist in.
Okay.
It was against a druid and I won. So
okay.
There you go. You did what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, 100% win rate. Done. We did it.
I was kind of annoyed. I was like, damn it. They did A&R refresh 10 mana weapon, which means I have to remove this and play Viper. Fortunately, I got the poisonous Ignis weapon for the occasion.
Oh yeah, easy. You know, it's just how you drew it up. I mean, that's fine, right?
I had to like play it and then break it with a 3 mana weapon. Very silly. All right.
All right.
Now we begin.
I am recording.
We're recording.
All right. Ready? 3, 2, 1, clap. 3, 2, 1, clap. Okay, starting the show in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome to episode 416 of Coin Conceived, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, October 5th, 2023 in the evening. Coming to you from Oregon, Ohio. It's me, Edelweiss. From Northern Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
Hi.
From Teldrassil, California, we have Negate. Wait, I didn't hear that. So was that just me, or was...
Oh no. Hello. Can you hear me now?
Again. All right, great. And from all around the world, we have you, dear listeners. Thank you, as always, for your reviews. If you would like to support the show, but cannot do so monetarily, it always helps us if you can leave us a 5-star review on your podcast feed of choice. So, how has everyone's life and ladder been? Wicked, why don't you kick us off?
Well, I hit Legend, so... Yeah, I got there on the second day of the month. I had 11x. I protected my MMR by not playing standard for most of the month for various annoyances, and then realized that it was like the 29th after all the balance changes hit, and I'm like, I'm just gonna wait. I'll just let it settle, let it cook for a couple days, and I'll figure out what to do on the first. So I just played Twist for the end of the month. I cooked up a Reno Cthulhu Priest that was shockingly not embarrassing.
It was really entertaining to watch.
Yeah. I've since updated it since they rolled over the season to the 40 card list, because I realized if you're playing Reno, you kind of have to play 40 cards, because like, why would you heal to 30 when you could heal to 40, right? So I mean, that's just leaving money on the table if you're not doing that, right? So I updated that, and I queued a game at lunch with that today, where I queued into someone running the secret Anyfin Paladin. That's 36 cards for some reason. That somebody hit like high legend, like rank 2 legend on the first day of the month with it. But it's got 36 cards in it. I played a couple games with it early, and I'm like, why does this have 36 cards in it? This is terrible. And they had the same. Yeah, well, they had the same experience, because they drew all their Murlocs except for their war leaders, and they had the Anyfin with no war leaders, the first one, and then the second one, I was able to survive and then clear. Like, I got a Hellfire off of a Cabal Courier, so I was able to Hellfire most of the Murlocs, and then Reno right after that, and then that was the end of that, because they'd drawn through their whole deck at that point. But so like, I have 100% win rate with that deck, I suppose, but it was it was like a positive win rate on stream Friday night. But then the month rolled, and I did Enrage Warrior up to like Diamond 5, and then Diamond 5 it stopped working for, I don't remember why, and I switched to Arcane Hunter for a few games, and I got up to like Diamond 1 with it, and then lost like 5 in a row, and then went back to the Enrage Warrior and went like 6-1 or something like that to get up to Legend. And this was before they banned Tony, so we'll talk about that, or ban the Jailer, so we'll talk, and which we'll talk about obviously. But I did have a game against a Plague Death Knight, a triple unholy Plague Death Knight, where they played Magatha and gave me both copies of Down with the Ship.
Oh, I had that too. That was really
it's very entertaining. And so I had a turn where I just, I had a lot of stuff on board, and I hit them in the face, and I put them to 1, and they immediately drew one of the plagues and died. I'm like, okay, it's always lethal. Like, so it's, that worked out pretty well. But it was a pretty good run. I ended up coming in top 200. I've since decayed to like 400. I'm like 350 or something like that right now, which it's like the 5th of the month, which is, it's about where I would expect to be. I don't think there's that many people in Legend yet. But I'm pretty happy with it, and I'll probably try to figure out tomorrow on my stream what the hell I'm going to play, if it's still going to be Enrage Warrior with all the druids, or if I saw on HS Replay that Control Priest is good into the 20% druids, so maybe Copium. But also on my stream tomorrow night, I'm kicking off my annual fundraiser for Boston Children's Hospital for ADHD Awareness Month. So it's because October is ADHD Awareness Month, and all 3 of my kids have spent a lot of time in the neurology department at Boston Children's Hospital, and they're freaking amazing at what they do. I mean, I know that they do a lot of good stuff. I think Bracy went there a lot for a lot of his heart stuff too, and if I remember correctly, that was where he spent most of his time, and they did some amazing things for him also. But they're just like a wonderful organization. They were in the crossfire of some culture war nonsense lately too, which is not great, but they're just do so much good work, and they deserve every penny that they can get. And I like to try to raise money for them every year. So we raised I think it was like $1,500 or so, it was like $1,700 last year. I want to try to get to 2,000 this year if possible. So we started at 100 because that's what I put in myself, but I'll be raising money on my stream. I'll also have a link in the show notes, and I'll be tweeting it out as well. So if it's something that you're in a position to give, and if you're not like completely understand. Like, not everybody's in a position to give all the time, but I like to do this to try to help get more kids the kind of help that my kids got, that allowed them to thrive and you know, be themselves, but be able to, you know, do everything that they can as though they were neurotypical. So it's a cause that's really important to me, and I hope, you know, if you are in a position to donate, that you would be so kind and try to make some, you know, some kids happier if they are going through discovering that they're neurodivergent, or, you know, any sort of other thing that the amazing folks at Boston Children's are able to help with. So
that's a really important cause. I can definitely say,
Yeah.
from both personal experience and students I've worked with, how important having that care is for so many people. So I'm really glad that you're back to the fundraising. For for Hearthstone, I played a little bit of Tony Druid because I figured I should, and we did not expect the emergency jailer ban. So I thought, well, I should have played some of this before Thursday. And I did okay with it. I think I wasn't nearly aggressive enough about getting the combat just like as fast as possible. I was doing a little too much, like waiting to make sure that I had everything. Like, no, you just kill them. I did have at least one game where I won with a tempo Tony. I think it was a Plague DK. They had shuffled a million plagues in. I'm like, just take a couple of these, and then then I'll jailer them out next turn. I think also there's a few times when I got ratted on my I got my Enubricon ratted, and so I couldn't do them both on the same turn. So that makes it a little harder, but I think that might have also happened that game. I actually did a lot better. I've played a lot of Enrage this week. I had like a 71% win rate with Enrage. Ooh. So that's been really successful. And I played some other decks partly to try to find a third deck for the listener series. Played some Hunter, played some Paladin. Played a bit of Miracle Rogue. Wasn't super successful with that. I had the tome tampering thing that I had seen happen to a different Miracle Rogue a couple weeks ago happen to me instead, where I made the mistake of saying, let's just get a bunch of tendrils from Yogg. This will go well for me. And then tome tampering all of my tendrils back into my deck. Whoops. So,
but they cost one.
That one, you know, when I got the emote from my opponent, I was like, you know, that's earned. I'm not going to get mad about that one. I ran into a couple of nature shamans. Someone had posted, there's a list with Yogg and 2 cold storages for the
yeah,
Yogg.
I think I saw this.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I saw this.
That's my kind of deck.
I'll dig that up while you're talking. I'm pretty sure I just saw this go through my feed.
Yeah, or I can, here, I have it. I'll put it in the show notes. So I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but it was pretty effective. You know, it's the newer version with Jazz Bass and Prescience that's only running Inza, Golganeth, and Yogg. So your Prescience gets you what you need every time. The second time that I saw it, I used my Battle Worn to copy their Golganeth twice, but they had their combo for the next turn, so it didn't quite matter. I didn't quite have lethal. I got them down like almost lethal, but almost is worth nothing against a nature shaman who has lethal. So, and I was finding, I also had a moment yesterday where I had just been talking to my partner about how I was feeling a lot better about the anomalies, facing them less, just wasn't thinking about them as much. Sometimes it was kind of fun. And then I got, probably because I had said that, I got them like 5 games in a row, including a couple that didn't work out very well for me. And I had a moment in the listener series where I had, you know, been like, hey, if we have one, that's totally fine. And then I was playing Enrage and I got the one where you have Yogg in your hand and it soaked like all of the buffs.
Oh no.
No. Oh, I hate it when that happens.
So that that didn't work out well for me. Although, to be fair, I don't know that I would have won that game anyway. My opponent played both of the games in that match really, really well. But yeah, sitting there going, well, this wasn't the luckiest anomaly for a listener series match when you're in Rage. So, but overall, a good weekend. I've really been enjoying a lot of the decks and in Rage, and I'm not quite Legend yet, so I have been hitting fewer Druids. I think I'm Diamond 5 right now.
That's right. I'm pretty far from Legend. My playtime has been mostly Baldur's Gate. I've been getting real in the weeds. You know, being a deck builder, of course, that carries over to what multi-class builds am I going to do in, Baldur's Gate / D&D kind of stuff. So I've gotten into this YouTuber, D4, D&D Deep Dive. And
oh boy.
he did a whole series of videos specifically for Baldur's Gate 3. He recently went back to his regular D&D stuff, but I almost feel bad for him because his videos for Baldur's Gate 3 got just a ludicrous number of views, right? And it's well, but now I want to go back to my regular content that's D&D based, and it gets way fewer
Nope,
views.
you're a Baldur's Gate streamer now, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see if he keeps putting out some, but he did here's a thematic but powerful build for each of the origin characters. Although he didn't do the hidden one, so I wonder if maybe he'll cover that some other time. And then has other videos just on these powerful multi-class builds, and so I've been playing some of those, branching out, combating my own sort of flares, trying to do my own stuff. I swear I spent a few hours last night just looking at class progression and deciding on various build things for my characters, not even really advancing the plot or doing anything, just respecking into various things.
That's been me with managing all of the magic items. I've been hoarding them.
Yeah.
I'm still rich anyway because I'm the kind of person who opens every chest that I see.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I do this, and what if I, so much of your build can even just be that. So I have an embarrassing number of hours on this playthrough for where I am in the playthrough.
Yep.
I keep stopping and changing things.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Larian Studios, meaning you haven't played the Divinity games, they like to do really interesting stuff with their items, and so they have brought that over into Baldur's Gate 3. So it's not just +2 Flaming Burst Longsword. That there are some simple items like that, but there's also a lot of stuff where they just added all these keywords. You can have builds that are entirely centered on you manage to get all the equipment that has to do with lightning charges or overheating or whatever.
Are you making Diablo builds in Baldur's Gate? Is that what's happening?
I mean, I guess. Yeah. So that's been a lot of time. And while I haven't been doing that, Twist just refreshed. So I have been messing around a bit in Twist. I built a XL Reno Mage because I can't help myself. And I miss the old days of, Antonidas, play a few cheap spells, get some fireballs, run Alex. And Alex is really good when everyone's, doing 40 health things. Get that.
Oh, that's the dragon I should have in my Cthulhu Dragon Reno Priest.
Set you to 15 from 40.
Yeah.
Feels good. Yep.
Yeah, I tried a freeze mage that was doing that, but I couldn't actually. It was a 40 card freeze mage, which, good luck. And I am not, my brain is not configured properly for freeze mage, and I just died every time I played it. But I can see the argument for it.
Yeah. I feel like if you're going 40 cards, you need to be more of a value-oriented thing that can flip the switch to damage rather than just all about damage. But anyway, so that's been Twist. Of course, I'm also doing my N'Zoth things in Paladin and Shaman that I keep trying to make work. It is very refreshing seeing people do all kinds of stuff now rather than it just being Warrior, Rogue, Warlock.
Now it's just Paladin. Paladin Warlock.
I haven't had that experience. Maybe I need to climb a bit more, but yeah, I haven't had that issue.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the hand buff paladin that East Sheep City posted on like day one, and then a lot of Stinzy's 40 card hand lock. That's been a lot of what I've seen.
Well, I'm sure people are excited to play hand, but at least against hand lock versus disco lock, it takes some time, right? So you feel like you have some agency rather than my opponent puked things into play and is not playing by the same rules. So yeah. And then in standard, I've been playing some Enraged Warrior. We will discuss that later, and how a matchup that I previously felt good about does not feel good anymore. Not, but and then because of something Wicked mentioned when we were just chatting, I went and built a 30-card blood list, and so maybe I'll be working on that.
I love how impressionable you are. It's just the best. Like, I don't even have to do much. All I have to do is, like, I did it with the druid initially. Like, all I had to do was post a link last week with the link to the druid, and oh no, and you were off to the races. And now I just said I played against the Blood DK, and that was enough to get you okay. I feel like you are just like the main character in BioShock. I just say, would you kindly, and you just go and start building a deck.
See, but with the Tony Druid thing, that was a know thy enemy sort of situation. And, oh boy, that has gotten worse. But, yeah, with this, I'm just predisposed to blood in general. And if I'm trying to build it to do a specific thing, it has to be 30 cards rather than 40. So, now I don't know. It probably does not beat the Druids well enough to warrant being, miserable into some other things, and I never want to see a Control Priest ever, but I don't know. I'll keep working on it.
I bet it beats the Plague Death Knights because you just don't draw the plagues with 40 cards. So
no, but it's 30 cards.
Oh, it's 30 cards. So yeah, never mind. You're gonna die. Okay.
We'd have to just heal and kill them.
Wow.
What are you gonna do?
Good luck with that, I suppose. Well, I guess before we start talking about we're not going to talk about Blood DK, don't worry, but I guess before we start talking about Enraged Warrior and how to play that against a lot of what you're seeing, as long as you're not queuing into Druids, we have a little bit of news, and I guess we should talk about that first. All right, so we had really not a whole lot of news, but one very significant news item that came into play this week, and that is that there was a server-side update on Tuesday, and patch 27.4.3 is a server-side hotfix patch rolling out today on Tuesday. Hearthstone update. The Jailer has been temporarily banned from Standard and Wild. Goodbye, Tony Druid. With the dev comment, we're putting the Jailer in jail for his crimes against the meta. When we made our last set of changes, Druid was still developing as a class following the mini-set. After our changes were locked in, Tony Druid appeared as the top archetype in Standard. We know that we want to adjust something in that deck in our next balance window, and we also know we don't want this deck to warp the meta in the meantime, so we're temporarily banning the Jailer until our next scheduled balance patch. The Jailer will be released on bail, aka unbanned, in our next scheduled balance patch. At that time, we'll make other adjustments to address Tony Druid and anything else that needs tweaking. So, Druid is dead, long live Druid, because just getting rid of the Jailer just means that that particular win con is removed. But now there is a Miracle Druid that seems to just, do Druid things and tops out at ENR. And I only play one game against it, so I'm not really sure what it does when it doesn't ENR. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it Solar Frost Lotus Blossom to draw 4 and gain 20. And then after that, it doesn't really matter. It does things, and then you end up facing a gigantic board and you die effectively. And I'm sure that there's Wind Fury Ignis things in it.
Yep.
So Megan, did you play this, or you just played against it, the new version?
Haven't played the new version yet. I have played against it some. I know that some, at very top Legend, it's been just everything. I saw some screenshots of people where it was just like half their games. The HS Replay says it's like 18% of Legend right now. And of course, Legend is not that many people. It's only the 5th of the month. It is quite a bit lower outside of Legend, more like 7% in most parts of Diamond. So I did run into it some, and when you get ANR going, this is when we saw ANR what we were thinking might happen with her.
Yeah.
And we finally, we like ended an episode going, well, on that note. So we finally hit that note, for good or ill. And of course, I think it really is in part enabled by the Windfury Ignis, and and then all the same things that were enabling Tony Druid.
I mean, in some ways, a lot of ways, it's enabled by, what is it, Embrace of Nature?
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where Druid has flashy things that kill you, often neutral things. Ignis, Jailer, it's just able to utilize them better because it gets to 10 mana more than other classes. But the thing that's really driving the whole engine is the consistency. And this has been true for quite a while at this point, right? Having Aquatic Form to dig. Previously, we had Moonlit Guidance. That's now gone, but Embrace of Nature now gives them this added consistency where, Zako was just like, hey, take out this mana reduction card. Some people were going down to 1, but he was recommending it doesn't matter if you have a dead card in Embrace of Nature later on, just take out this mana reduction thing, because what you want is to forge and nourish for 2 crystals and 3 cards as soon as you can, every time. And I think some of that refinement, alongside people going, okay, well, no Auctioneer, let's do this whole, spread the word to draw cards for no mana on that. Like, you're removing stuff while you draw cards. The thing that upgrades becomes draw 2, gain 10, right? That getting solared is pretty filthy against anything trying to kill you urgently, right? Like, just casual gain 20, draw 4. So, Druid having as part of its identity this whole ramp and card draw thing, like, those are a dangerous combination. And when there's this high density and powerful enough win conditions, it rears its ugly head again.
Well, it's ramp and card draw and armor. The armor, I think, is really important, because there were, in the Tony Druid, there were definitely some games where I got them down to 6 and then they were at 30 the following turn, right? So I think that I think we need to make sure that we're counting the armor in this, because the gain 20 on Solar Frost Lotus Blossom is a real part of it, because that means that you can't mostly get them, right? You can't ship them down, because if you leave them at 2, they're not even close to dead, right? It's because normally when we have a deck like this, right, the thing that counterbalances that is aggro, because aggro can go hit them in the head while they're sitting around and ramping and drawing cards. But when the draw cards also gains you 10 to 20 armor, then you don't have to worry about aggro as long as you don't die by turn 4 or 5, which nothing is killing you in this meta that quickly. Even the aggressive, I would say Arcane Hunter is probably the most aggressive deck that we have in the meta. That is not killing you by 5 unless things have gone very, very wrong for you. So I was saying on Twitter this week that it feels like Druid is at the point where it kind of needs a rework in general in order to fix the problems with it, because it feels like it's in OG shaman, OG priest territory, right? Where it's either unplayable or it's the terror of the meta, and there's no in between. Like Druid went from unplayable to like Jason from the Friday the 13th movies. Every time they try to kill it, it comes bursting out of the ground again, right? So and to be fair, like this deck was just coming up when they were starting to put together the first balance patch. They were trying to address something that they could do with a server side ban, which is really ties their hands as far as what they can do. Because this isn't like a normal balance patch. This is just like, we see an issue with this deck and we're going to take out part of the win con, but the win con is not the problem. The problem is everything that leads to the win con. We're back in, I forget which meta it was. It was probably like it wasn't Knights of the Throws and Throw. It was probably like Kobolds and Catacombs, where like Druid was 26 cards in a win condition, right? And it, was it Togwaggle? Was it Jades? Was it, whatever it was, right? It didn't really matter what the win con was, because the cards that were in the deck that led up to it are what's powerful. And I think that's really where we've gotten to with Druid, that they have, Gadgetzan Auctioneer looked like an enabler until clearly it wasn't. Okay, so we'll nerf the win condition, they'll find a different one. But because the engine is so strong that it doesn't really matter what's at the top end. Okay, well, we can't do Tony Jailer. Now we'll do ENR and Freya in ETC in order to get there.
I think that another enabler here is Yogg, as well as Prison Breaker. That gives, it solves some of, say, the problem that, say, like Moonbeam Druid was having, where it's just rolled over as soon as you played some minions. Now you have armor gain, and then some clears, and the armor gain helps make up for the fact that the clears are not enough for every board. I think part of what makes this hard to nerf is that it would be really easy to make it either unplayable or really, really polarized. Where if you give it a weakness to one type of deck, but then it's still really strong against all the other types of decks, and then rolls over to just one type, that's not great. So I think they have to really think about what gives it weaknesses that are not super polarized. And I also wonder whether, and this might just kill the deck, but if you just take Nourish out of core, I think it probably would kill the deck.
100%.
Good. Yeah.
But good. Let it do something that's not like, I don't think that it's healthy to have your choose one cards do both with Nourish in the format, because that's the only card that they ever use it with. Now there's the discount one, so fine, but like most of the time
people are taking that out.
You don't want to hit that,
right? It's always just Nourish. Like we had this with Jerry Rig Carpenter too, where your only choose one card was Nourish, because that was all you wanted to hit. And I think that if we're going to have choose one synergies in standard, then Nourish has to be either non-existent or a lot weaker than it is right now. It needs to give you empty mana crystals. It needs to draw you 2 cards. It needs to cost $1 million. I don't know what it is, or just yeet it out of standard, right? Like that's one other option.
At one time,
it was, and then they brought it back down. But it's like every time that there's choose one synergies, that's the card you abuse, and it's boring, right? Like it's also boring from a design standpoint, because like you aren't using, like you're only using the choose one synergies to abuse Nourish. You're never really using it to do things with some of the other choose one cards, because you don't want to have any more in them in your deck, because you always want to hit Nourish when it's drawing you a choose one card.
Yeah.
We have something that does, is somewhat similar, where it draws cards and it has armor in order to ramp and, get into its late game, but its late game doesn't come so early because it always has Nourish on 5.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether there would be some other, this Druid deck would be killed by no Nourish, or Nourish being nerfed into the ground, but some sort of Druid deck maybe that actually has more interesting choose one possibilities. Because I kind of don't want to hit Embrace of Nature because of the possibility for it other archetypes potentially, and it's a problem because of Nourish, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've also got Disciple of ANR, which saw a little bit of play in the Treant Druid, right? I think the only other thing we've seen used for that choose both has been Drum Circle.
Yeah, that's true.
And as obnoxious as that was in some ways, where it was all about getting, this board in a box as quickly as possible, and that could auto win some things, I much prefer that to just everything being about getting Nourish of choose both. And, there's another card, Ancient of Growth, summon 3/2/2 Treants or transform your Treants into 5/5 Ancients with Taunt, right? That being as a get both would be cool too. But none of that's ever going to happen if it's just always used for Nourish. And as you say, I like Embrace of Nature. I think it's cool, this whole, getting to do both effects on certain things. I would love to see a deck that was, Ancient of Growth, Drum Circle, Cenarius or something. Maybe that would be too much. But yeah, when suddenly the best thing in Druid becomes draw your whole deck, play these neutral win conditions, and that's the other thing that makes this hard to address, right? Is Ignis, not just a Druid card. Yogg, not just a Druid card. Really big offenders in terms of what Druid is doing. But when you're nerfing those, you're nerfing those for everything. And now there's some arguments to be made that we're seeing Ignis and Yogg all over the place. Maybe they should be toned down, but it's a little early for them, right? Both of them
I don't think it's early.
Both of them came up pretty recently, right? So usually they give those some time to breathe. They gave Denathrius time to breathe, right? When that was everywhere. It's a neutral. I kind of, the more I think about it, the more I think you're kind of right that maybe Nourish just needs to get removed from core. And I'm sure some people will be upset about that, but it's not like Druid doesn't have other ramp options. Like, you still have Widowbloom Seedsman, which is an incredible card. Wild Growth is still there, which feels like more of a core card power level, right? Where it's like, okay, yeah, it's ramp. Like, if you want to ramp, you've got Wild Growth, right? And it feels like there's a cost. But when you're just always drawing Nourish because you have 4 of them, and you're always playing it on 4 or 5 because sometimes you innervate or coin it.
Yeah, no, and there's cards that have no chance of ever seeing play as long as we have Nourish, like Beetlemancy, 12 armor, or summon 2/3/3 beetles with taunt. If you get both of those, maybe that's okay, 12 armor and 2/3/3 beetles with taunt. But you would never want that over Nourish, and so it's just never, ever going to see play if there's Nourish that you're aiming for.
I mean, can I point something out? Were you aware that Miracle Growth is still legal in Standard?
No, I was not.
It's not good enough, right? Like, that's how disgusting we are. And like, I will say, like, Ignis doesn't need to have Wind Fury in the pool, right? There are other classes that abuse that, right? Like Warrior doesn't need Ignis to have Wind Fury either. And I think that taking Wind Fury out of the pool would make Ignis a less oppressive card. Yogg is a problem in things like Miracle Rogue. It's just that Miracle Rogue can't keep up with Druid, which is why we're not seeing it. But I'm fairly sure that as soon, like, I think that this is a yes and situation, because like the problem with Yogg in particular is that it is providing a extremely cheap, most of the time, board clear to decks that otherwise would not have an answer for a board, like Moonbeam Druid, like Miracle Rogue. I'm trying to think of what else there is, but there's a few, several. I mean, there was even like the spell centric creation protocol priest, right, where you're just trying to get as many Yoggs as possible, and being able to eliminate a taunt or clear a board for decks that don't normally have that capability, I think is a problem, because it just allows those kind of degenerate solitaire quote unquote decks to exist, right? That could just play a million spells, don't care about anything that you're doing because it has an escape button. So I think that Yogg is also part of what's enabled this, and if we do just deal with Druid, then we're gonna have Miracle Rogue, we're gonna have Creation Protocol Yogg Priest, we're gonna have some other Nature Shaman, yeah. We're gonna have a bunch of those other decks, so I think you have to deal with Yogg. Ignis, we could have a conversation about. I feel like having Wind Fury in the pool is like, there are other problems and they've been problems, but maybe they're not as bad because like you don't always roll it.
I almost wonder if you take Wind Fury out of the pool and you still, do you slightly buff the weapon's attack or something like that? Like
that was
mana one.
What Wicked mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think I don't necessarily have a problem in general with some sort of neutral board clears because I think it can make things less polarizing. Like I think something like Prison Breaker is a powerful card that helps strategies that wouldn't normally have things. But Yogg is so flexible, so cheap for these decks, and can get copied sometimes. And I can see them. I would expect they might wait a little bit to try to address it just because it is a really popular card. It is a new card, but I'm also sure that they are looking at it at least because it is a big enabler. And, clearly just hitting certain win conditions is just playing whack-a-mole with the meta.
Yeah. And like, we have Summer Flower Child in Druid still, which is an incredible card that you never play anymore because you're just skipping right on past that part of the game, right? Yeah. Draw 2 cards that cost 6 or more, Finale that cost 1 less. This is a great card, just not relevant, right? Like, Druid's just completely skipping the mid game with the, nourish for ramp and draw.
Yeah. And I mean, like that Nature Shaman that we were talking about earlier too, right? Like it runs 3 minions. Because it already wants to do that because of prescience, right? Because it only wants to draw like 5 and 6 drops or 15 drops in this case, right? So it already is inclined to not run a lot of minions, and then Yogg's just there as another clear that's free by the time that you get to play it. And I mean, I feel like we're in Kazakhstan territory, right? Like when Kazakhstan first came out, and every deck seemed to run Kazakhstan. It ran like the bare minimum. Oh no, it just didn't run minions, right? Because the original Kazakhstan said if all the minions that you started in your deck are dragons, then Kazakhstan goes off. So then people would just run like that and maybe 1 or 2 other dragons and a whole bunch of spells. We are right back there with Yogg. And like we've seen this movie and we know how it ends. Like I bet that they're going to, when they do it, they're going to take a round where they try to take a lighter nerf. It's not going to work, and then they're going to have to nerf it into the ground before the next expansion comes out. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wonder, do you change the effects, or do you just say, well, let's make it come out slower?
They're going to try that. Yeah.
Right? You think like they put it to 20 mana?
Yeah, and then they see that
a couple of decks that can turbo it out.
Yeah, and then they have to change the effects anyway, right? Like that's almost certainly what they're going to do. I don't blame them for trying to do that, right? Like I'm not saying that they're wrong to do it. And I don't know anything. I'm going to be very clear. I don't know anything. I don't have any inside information. I just know what I'm going by past precedent, right? Like I can see what they're going to try, because like they don't want to kill a card that's that popular right off the bat, right? So they're going to try to make it 20, maybe even 25. Let's just say like they're going to make it 25 and just say you really need to go in on it, and it's not going to matter. It's going to be just as oppressive. And then
if it was
like 25 would matter. 20, I don't know if it's going to make that much of a difference, but 25 would probably matter. But like,
I mean, the problem is the difference would always be kind of invisible, right? You would not notice when they still get it off and clear your board, and you're not going to notice when you just kill them either, right? Because they weren't able to reduce enough fast enough.
Yeah.
So those are always kind of hard to figure out. At least with Kazakhstan, you very much could tell the difference. But yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of ramp and draw still left if you take out Nourish.
Yeah.
Like the Druid enjoyers will get upset, but there's still a lot there. I mean, yeah, as you say, Miracle Growth a once considered oppressive, fantastic card that drew you and gave you this big minion that is just irrelevant because it's too slow for the deck. And Summer Flower Child that I mentioned earlier, there's still like a lot of stuff here that is slower, and I think that would be good for it to be slower.
Yeah, I mean, you could still do due process if you really want to turbo draw, right? Like that's
Yeah.
still a thing you can
Yeah.
do. You'll probably die doing it, but you can do it, right? Like that's
Right. People were not generally upset about Moonbeam Druid unless they were playing Control Warlock, right? Because that at least firmly gets countered by minion decks.
Yeah.
But this Ramp Druid now, I mean, people like playing it because it's one of those that the better you are at it, it really affects the win rate. But then that also tends to mean less agency for the other player. And it's very much this consistent engine of get to your nourish, ramp into the end game, get a clear with Yogg so that you can then gain 20 armor, and at that point it doesn't matter, right? You get an Ignis weapon, and Ignis is flexible too, so sometimes that gets to be another clear against aggressive decks. And then once they've run you out of stuff, I mean, all the gaps, all the weaknesses kind of get filled once you have the mana to do whatever you want, because A&R can heal you to full life and give you a 5/5 taunt. It's not always refresh mana crystals. It's refresh mana crystals most of the time, but sometimes it's just restore to full, get a 5/5 taunt.
Well, and sometimes it's both, because you refresh, you get Freya, you copy it, and then you still go back to full life, right? I guess the other question I would have is, do the eclipses need to stay in standard? Because solar eclipse is the other thing that's enabling this, right? Like if Frost Lotus Blossom, that is way too long of a card for how annoying it is. If like Frost Lotus Blossom was just draw 2, gain 10, I think it would probably be okay. The problem is that it's very often draw 4, gain 20, and that's not okay, right? And I mean, and Lunar Eclipse is also enabling more spells early to get Yogg out faster, right? Because it's making your nest spell cost less. That's less of an issue, but I mean, you're not taking one out and not the other, just because they kind of go together. But like Solar Eclipse is the one card that I forget about every time, and then I get angry every time that they play it, and I don't even need to see what the second card is to be angry, because I know whatever it is, I'm not gonna like it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of options. Like Rake is also an absurd card that could cost 2 mana. I mean, there's so many things they could do. The eclipses, you know, it's almost like I'd be curious to see what it's like without Nourish before you do something like address the eclipses. But I wouldn't mind, as you say, they are older, right? I don't know if their intent when they do core swaps is to always like swap something back in or not. I don't know.
I mean, they don't have to, right? Like they yeeted Auctioneer out, and they haven't replaced it. I think they've said that they want that the core set to be fluid. It's not like in the old days when they took cards out of Classic or rotated them to Wild early, and then they had to replace them in order to keep the size of the Classic set the same, right? So
I think it's more just like, I could see some people being like, hey, but now this class just has fewer cards than the others, right? Like, it's one thing with Auctioneer where it's a neutral, but when it's you removed 3 of Druid's core cards and now they just have less stuff, that seems like, you know, some people are going to want replacements.
You know, in hockey, when your team foul someone egregiously, you have to play with one less player on the ice for a little while, and that's just the punishment for it. I think that's fair. I like hockey rules for here.
I feel like what you do is you take out Nourish and you put in like some other wild ramp card that's less offensive. I'm looking at them. Like, Wild Heart Guff, not that one.
No.
Don't say Overgrowth. Don't say Overgrowth.
Yeah. Or Lightning Bloom, like that would, you know, like
No,
we're gonna
not
get a new
Lightning Bloom.
expansion. We're gonna get a new expansion in a couple months. I would not be surprised if there's more ramp in it, right? And like, it's gonna be like a month and a half that they would
Greedy
be down.
Sprite.
Oh god. Sure, they can have greedy
That's
sprite. I'm
probably the
okay with
worst
that.
one.
Yeah.
Probably the worst one. It's a 3-mana, 3/1 Death Rattle, gain an empty mana crystal. For those who don't remember all the way back to Kobolds and Catacombs.
Yeah, that was easily the worst one. That's pretty clear, yeah. Or they could have Floop's Glorious Gloop. How about that? Like
It's not really a ramp. No, don't joke about that because
that card was
has
also
also done
Oh,
crimes.
no,
I
here-
guess with Auctioneer, but
No, you know what they can have? They can have Darnassus Aspirant back. Battle Cry, gain an empty mana crystal. Death Rattle, lose a mana crystal. They can have that. That's fine.
I mean, I feel like the most reasonable but also inoffensive one would be like Mire Keeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mire Keeper, 4-mana, choose one, summon a 2/2 slime, or gain an empty mana crystal.
Yeah. Or
But
like
it's also-
like Breath of Dreams, maybe. Like that, like draw a card if you're holding a dragon, gain an empty mana crystal. Like, sure. You know.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a ton of like dragon synergy to bring
Good.
in, but yeah, I mean, honestly, like,
Yeah.
no, maybe that would be too good. I was gonna say invigorate the like new one they put in
Yeah.
that's choose one, gain an empty mana crystal, or draw a card. Like that is less offensive than Nourish. That's
Well,
still really
yeah.
good, but
Yeah. You could put in Grove Tender, choose one, give each player a mana crystal, or each player draws a card.
yeah. I mean, lots of options. I don't know that they're
I don't think they have
this.
to. I don't think they have to.
Definitely,
I think
if they did, just not Overgrowth, not that one. Don't need that again.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah, it just feels like as long as Druid has all this consistency and ability to ramp and draw cards and refresh mana. I don't even know if they're playing that 3/3 that refreshes anymore, but like you're just able to do so many things at once, and then reduce Yogg, clear the board, gain armor, draw cards. Like it's just this well-oiled machine that then they get to throw in A&R stuff at the end to win. I'm kind of happy that A&R is getting play because she wasn't for so long, but this isn't quite the power level that I want to see out of those decks.
That's a monkey paw situation right there is what that is. Like, which is appropriate because it's a beast for Druid, but it's but yeah, I mean the problem is that they printed a lot of the same types of effects, and like once you have a critical mass of that, right? Like you keep printing draw, you keep printing ramp, you keep printing mana cheat, you keep printing armor, like eventually you just get a critical mass of that, and then a way to abuse it, and you're off to the races. But
I have one last thing I want to say, which is that while Jailer is the thing that got banned, and I assume them saying it will come back after a balance patch, that means they're going to like change the text on Jailer. It is going to do something different, because I don't know how else that would work. It already costs 10 mana.
They could change the things around it, right? Like if they nerf a couple things around it, and then Jailer is fine by itself, right? Like if they if they give like Tony the Elucia treatment or something, right? Then like copy your opponent's deck to yours while it's in play instead of swapping decks. Like they could do the Elucia thing.
Yeah. I kind of hope they do something like that, because Tony is the thing that makes Jailer unbearable. Like I don't think people were super complaining about these immune boards. Like there's still some classes that can deal with it and some classes that just can't. But I like that you could, put Jailer in an ETC as something slower, as a Hail Mary of, okay, well, I just need something to make my stuff hard to clear here, right? But Tony, there's just Yeah, it's always crimes. There's no
Yeah.
there's no like benign use of Tony.
Yeah,
And
it's
the
like
two
Lucio was
together-
too, right? Like Lucio was fine too until it was getting abused in Shadow Priest, right? Like it was the same thing. Like it was fine in Control because you just like did it for one turn, you got to get rid of a couple things, and then it went back. It was in Shadow Priest when you started dumping your hand and then playing it to basically lock out your opponent's turn that it became a problem, and then they changed it so that it copied, and then it was done. And I think that seems like a blueprint for Tony, because nobody cares if you're copying their deck, right? It's the fact that you're making their deck empty. That's the problem. Like if you want a Jailer and then Tony so you're not going to fatigue, via con Dios, right? Like go like it's fine. I don't care about that. That's
cool.
okay. Yeah, that's a reasonable approach. Like I'm okay with that. But like it's because you're also like eliminating your opponent's deck in the process that it becomes the problem. So I think that seems like a reasonable solution, but I'm sure they'll find something. But like Tony is the symptom. Tony is not the disease. I think that's clear from what's happened since that ban.
Yep.
Okay. Well, there were a couple of other things. We won't go too deep into them because there were a couple bug fixes. There were Battlegrounds updates. They changed a couple of heroes that are banned when certain anomalies are in play. There are a number of bug fixes. I think the main one was the Elixir of Vigor interaction that we talked about last week. Elixir of Vigor is the one where when you play a minion, it shuffles a copy into your deck, I believe.
In duels, yeah.
Yeah. So removed Elixir of Vigor from the passive treasure pool due to an unintended interaction. So that's just done. You're not doing that anymore. There are a bunch of other minor bug fixes. You can go read the patch notes if those things are interesting to you. The only other major news that we got, well, it's major news is probably stretching it, but we did get a pretty good set of shop updates this week. We got the Stepfather Lorthamar bundle. So this is $10 USD or 1,000 runestones, and Stepfather Lorthamar is basically the Godfather. Like all of the emotes are very mafia movie inspired. If that's the kind of thing that appeals to you and you enjoy Hunter, that may be up your alley. We also got the Wicked Prince Kael'thas bundles returned to the shop for $6.99 USD or 1,000 gold. So that was around, I think, this time last year. I think a lot of these that we're seeing now that are coming back with gold were around the Nathria era. So if you are interested in that, go ahead. It seems like there's also a lot of customized deals that are in the shop. We're not going to cover all of them, but go check out the shop if you were looking at getting like a battle ready deck or you're looking at getting some packs. There might be a deal that's in there for you.
Some people have been seeing a version of Odin Warrior in the shop, so it's pretty close to the meta Odin Warrior. So if that's something you've been wanting to play but don't have the cards for, see if you have that in the shop.
But that is blessedly, given how the last couple of weeks have gone, it for news. So we can actually talk about a deck because the meta stayed somewhat stable for a week and we haven't had 75 minutes of news to talk about. So we should do that before something breaks and we have to go talk about that instead.
All right. Well, we have mentioned Enraged Warrior like every week for months, but we've never actually done a deck explanations about it. And it's a deck that we all enjoy and that does struggle some into Druid right now, but otherwise is in a really good spot in the meta. In Diamond through Legend, according to HS Replay, since the patch, it was actually the top deck with a 56.86% win rate. In Legend, only in the last 3 days, it was lower. Again, that's early in the month. That's a fairly small group of people. It's at 52%, so it is still positive despite the presence of druids and the fact that that is not an impossible matchup, but definitely not the matchup that it most wants to see. But we also expect, as we talked about at length, that they will address druid in some way. We'll see how that actually pans out, of course. But it's a really strong deck. It's a deck that's somewhat underplayed and has a lot of flexibility and a lot of things to know about how to play it. So we thought that we would go into it. We have a couple of builds here. They're pretty similar. We have one Enraged Warrior number 174 Legend, Wicked Good.
I didn't build the deck, by the way. I just found it on HS Replay, just so we're clear.
It's a very snazzy title, though.
Yeah.
So it has Foul Egg, Sanguine Depths, Sun Fury Champion, Anima Extractor, Battle-Worn Faceless, the new card, Crazed Wretch, Embers of Strength, Jam Session, Acolyte of Pain, Imbued Axe, Steam Guardian, Light of the Phoenix, the draw one, Thori Balor, Olgra, Trial by Fire, Ramornia, and Grommash. We also have a deck here from World 8 that is more optimized for the top legend meta, where there are a lot of druids. Doesn't necessarily turn that matchup favored, but helps if that's what you're seeing. So he took out Ramornia and Grom and one of the Acolytes of Pain for 2 Speaker Stompers and a Pozic. The idea being you don't have time for Grom and Ramornia.
Yeah.
And they're not going to get through those ANR taunts anyway. So what you have to do is really kill them early and or buy yourself a turn with the Speaker Stomper. So that is a tech option, again, if you're seeing a lot of druids and you're not seeing, for example, a lot of control decks, versus the control decks having something like Grom or Ramornia as a backup, or just to help with your OTK if your Crazed Wretch is not quite getting there, can be helpful. So,
yeah, I guess I'll point out that I got Legend before the Jailer ban, so I was hitting Tony Druids, not ENR Druids, and against Tony Druid, I liked having the bigger top end because you could get through with like a Ramornia or a Grom. I did, and ultimately, like, I don't think you're targeting Druid. I think you're targeting all the stuff that's targeting Druid with this deck. If you're seeing a fair amount of Druid, like, you're just accepting that the Druid games are probably not going to go your way, but you're targeting all the stuff that's trying to target it, which are slow control decks and Plague DK. And you are very good against those decks, and having the extra burst against those decks, I find, is fairly helpful. I'm also inclined to play slower decks in general. World 8 is much more of an aggro player than I am. I think we've pretty firmly established that. I like to go face, but I like to go face all at once, right? So, and I had games where the Grom 30 damage combo was relevant, right? Like, I did have to do that. Yeah, I did it a few times, and you know, but that's the kind of that's my style of play, right? Like, I'm more likely to trade early and then go for the big flashy win later, whereas someone who's more accustomed to playing actual aggro as opposed to playing it when he's forced into it, like I am, might have a different play style and then feel like they have your cards weighing them down. I always feel like I'm kind of naked when I'm playing the deck without Grom, but it is kind of an emotional support Grom a fair amount of the time too.
I do want to.
Yeah, I sort of split the difference. I had Ramornia, but not Grom, and I had Pozic. Because I do like the more aggressive decks, but I liked having one more heavier option with Ramornia, who can also sometimes clear a taunt on your way in face. But, you know, and some of the other good matchups that you have sort of either way, Arcane Hunter, Rainbow Mage, Paladins, those are also, if that's the kind of thing that you're seeing, this is a great deck into those matchups.
Yeah, and you can find all kinds of versions of Enraged Warrior in our Discord. It's been one of the heavily updated threads in the Deck Lab forum is the Battleborn in Rage thread, and Enzo and World 8 are in there bouncing ideas all the time. You'll see posts from about when Funky Monkey, a legend with Enrage Warrior. I'm partial to Enzo's list that has the like menagerie draw spell.
Oh, roaring applause.
Yeah, roaring applause.
I hate roaring applause.
I'm success with both, and I do know that that's an option, and having treasure guards feels nice.
Yeah, I mean, I go back and forth. Basically, the draw is having treasure card to shore up defenses a bit, can be really nice wall to put in the way, and then additional minion type. Thoribalor has 2 minion types, and sometimes you will copy it with a Battle-Worn Faceless, and so then you've automatically got draw 3 as long as those are alive, because they each count for a different minion type, one for Elemental, one for Beast.
Yeah.
And
same with the chickens that come out of the Foul X. Those are Zombie and Beast.
Although do note that the Foul Egg
Beast
itself is just undead.
Yes.
You have to have the chicken for it to count for both, but... Yeah, I just think sometimes it's nice being able to sort of do that turbo draw. It plays out a bit differently from having the Acolyte of Pains, because you've got to like find the right time to do it. Whereas Acolyte, you can just play on curve with Sanguine Depths. There's definitely an appeal to that. The other thing about the Roaring Applause list is it does not have the 6-mana fire spell.
Oh, Trial by Fire.
Trial by Fire has really felt, on the one hand, it's a little awkward because you can't like combo it with the Sun Fury champion, but you wouldn't really want to with how much it costs anyway. Yeah. And it's really nice for clearing out some taunts, or just you fell behind on the board and you're taking a little too much damage, or it can pressure. You get those out, kill off a couple, you have some really big minions that are threatening to get bigger when they try to trade them off. So, and sometimes you get it for 5 mana because you draw it off the Steam Guardian and you discount it by 1. So I have liked the Trial by Fire cards, but I think really any of these builds you can do well with.
Definitely.
The latest from Enzo, like just as we were starting the stream, was that he's playing Blazing Power, which is the one that gives +1/+1 to a minion for every damaged in order to just get that last bit of damage over the top.
Yep.
Earlier. So
yeah, that's been in and out of the list occasionally, but yeah, that one can sometimes get there. But I think that like a lot of it doesn't really matter which list you start with. I think a lot of it is just getting reps in on the deck and understanding how the deck works. Like as far as the card options are concerned, like you're kind of chipping away at the edges, and I think any of them are pretty much going to have a fair shot against what you're seeing against the same types of lists. Some of them have like a couple percentage points here and there, but understanding how to play the deck is the thing that is hard at first, which is why this is probably the best deck that nobody's playing, and it's been that way for a while now. Like it's not a flashy deck. You don't get to discover a million cards. You're playing with the cards in your deck, which is rare for a Hearthstone deck now, and it can sometimes give you the old school Miracle Rogue hands where you were staring at a handful of backstabs and preps and nothing to do with them, and you're just waiting to top deck something to turn your deck on. Like it's less that way than the Rift version, I feel, because the Rifts were just kind of air a lot of the time. Like they helped with drawing some of the minions out of the deck, but and getting some buffs on them occasionally, but ultimately like Bridge Rift costs a lot of mana, and if you're not getting a card draw off of it and you can't set it up, or you can't set your mana up that way, it just felt really awkward and kind of useless in the late game. It doesn't feel like you have as much air in any of these versions of the list. Like most of your cards will do stuff for you when you want. You are trying to play on curve fairly often. Like it's okay to float mana, but like I was playing this on Monday night, and I don't know why, but every time I hit an anomaly, it was always like I don't say always, but most of them, like a disproportionate number, were the if you float mana get a coin, Of course, I always queue into a druid when that happens. Like, that's just science. But it felt like when I was playing this or the Arcane Hunter, like, it was just like that anomaly was wasted because I never wanted to float mana, right? Like, there were a lot of turns where I would go by and I just wouldn't have any coins to play with because, like, it would mean throwing off my game plan a lot. Like, you really do want to be spending all your mana, like, doing fundamental Hearthstone things when you're playing a deck like this.
This deck feels like Naga Priest to me, and that's why I like it. But it took me a little while to get into the deck, and I think that this has happened to a lot of people who've given it a try, is that it isn't super obvious how to play this deck, and I think also prior versions were a little more clunky, and so you'd kind of bounce off. Like, I bounced off this deck at least once, if not twice, even though I was like, on paper, I'm going to love this deck. And once I did put enough reps in and talk enough to people in the Discord server about the deck that I kind of turned a corner with it. I really loved it. I love that it's flexible. I love that it's proactive, but also can have these big spikes, either a big board spike or a big spike that suddenly goes face. And that's kind of like Naga Priest too, where it could be really snowbally, or it could make a big board, or it could suddenly hit you with a 30 attack minion. So this deck does scratch some of that same itch. Now, if you didn't like Naga Priest, you should still give this a try. It's not the same deck.
Yeah.
And it's not like Naga Priest in that you must draw this one card or your deck doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need your Anima Extractor early on. You know, you definitely want your Anima Extractor or your Imbued Axe, but you don't feel like, well, my deck just doesn't function until I draw this card the way that Naga Priest felt.
Yeah. Yeah. Bloodsworn Mercenary does feel kind of like Boon of the Ascended when Naga Priest got it. It does feel like it just kind of like it's the one missing piece that kind of takes it to the next level.
I do want to say, this is not Bloodsworn Mercenary. It is Battle-Worn Faceless. And
oh yeah, I was just reading the show notes and somebody trolled me.
there is a pretty major difference in that Bloodsworn Mercenary, part of what's fantastic, although Anima Extractor didn't exist back then, so this wasn't even a thing, but it has been in Wild for a bit, is its own minion, and what it does is it summons a copy of a damaged minion. I believe it could only target friendlies.
Yes.
And so back in the day, this was the one thing that beat the busted Demon Hunter decks, because you would have your Risky Skipper, Armor Smith, and then Bloodsworn Mercenary would copy the Armor Smith, and since the Mercenary itself is a minion, it would also take damage and proc the Armor Smith. And Battle-Worn Faceless is still extremely good, and I think is incredibly powerful, but I have seen since playing with this deck how it is in some cases weaker, or at least that difference can be very pronounced. Since Battle-Worn Faceless transforms itself into whatever you're copying, any buffs it gets on it from Anima Extractor are wasted. So unless you're playing it on a board where nothing is damaged because it ate all the buffs, and so you're like, I guess this is an 8/8, I'm going to throw it out, which doesn't happen too often, but sometimes happens. It's going to transform, and so I am partial to, if I can, I want to copy something before I'm doing a lot of hand buffing, either, a Thoribalor, because that can be very powerful if you're needing to, like, have recurring boards a bunch, or copying the Anima Extractor, of course, then you get to double up on your buffs and not worry about the Battle-Worn Faceless eating them. Just something to make use of it before it's going to end up eating a bunch of Anima Extractor buffs and not really getting that value. And since it is transforming, you don't get that extra minion in play the way that you did with Bloodsworn Mercenary. I think most of the time it's probably still a better card than Bloodsworn Mercenary, but those are pretty distinct weaknesses, differences in that. Biggest strength, though, you can copy opponent's stuff.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
you do have that same thing with Reverberations, where it's like, oh, you Yogg to clear my board? Okay, I'm going to copy your Yogg to steal your Yogg to steal, like, your other best thing. Because if they use the Hysteria effect, the Mind Control effect is still there, and that's like, since both of those exist, and they only used one of them, most of the time you can make use of the remaining effect. And so, yeah, the number of times where it's, I will copy your Yogg to steal your Yogg to steal whatever your other best minion is.
Yeah,
very good swing turn.
That's been the most, that's been the other use case for it. But I mean, it's also good just get another Anima Extractor, get another Acolyte of Pain, get another Crazed Wretch early and just pressure, right? Like very often I'll just Crazed Wretch, turn 4, Crazed Wretch, hit it with a Sanguine Depths, and then copy it and hit them for 10, right? 10 is a big number. It's a lot of damage, and then they still have to deal with the minions that are on board after that. They might be able to, they might not, but that's just a lot of damage. You do have the full OTK, which is Grom, hit it with the Sanguine Depths, swing face with Imbued Axe, and then copy it, and that's 30. And I've done that. It doesn't happen often, but it is a thing you can do. But you can just Battleworn Faceless is just a card that is just value. You don't have to greed it. You don't have to save it for an OTK. Just find a spot where there is a damaged minion on the board that you would like another one of, and just play it. And it's probably fine. It's better than holding it.
You can actually use the fact that you don't want it to soak buffs as encouragement to play this deck better. It encourages you not to get too greedy. And sometimes you need that reminder. Unless you're playing against something like a Control Priest or heaven help you, a Blood DK. Actually, that's a very favored matchup for us, but no one ever wins when it's a Blood DK. I
won because I won today because I queued into a Blood DK who said thanks every time I played a minion, and then I beat the hell out of them, and then I thanked them at the end. Because that was just polite. They thanked me a lot. I felt like I should return that.
You should thank them for that game.
Yes.
But you can, if you have the right hand for it, you can make a really early snowball, or you can make an Imbued Axe board in the mid game, get out of range of a Prison Breaker, for example, and really put some pressure on. Whether you want to say tempo the Extractor depends on who you're facing, and also if you have 2 in your hand, then you can be a lot more liberal with the first one. Or if you're facing something that's not going to easily clear 4 health, you might want to, and you have, a Sanguine Depths, you have, make sure you have a good minion in your hand to be buffed. I have made this mistake where I'm this is a great place to tempo the Anima Extractor. Oh wait, I have nothing for it to buff in my hand. Don't do that. But otherwise, if you do have something like a Crazed Wretch in your hand, you can go for some of that early proactive pressure. I like the note in the show notes that you put here of how do you know which game plan to pursue? Listen to what your hand wants you to do. A lot of this does depend on what you draw when.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what makes it such a challenging deck. And I do this with most decks I play, which is not always great. But I think that's why I'm always what do you mean Enraged Warrior is a hard deck? I'm always confused by people picking up and putting this down. But that's because I always do the thing that I think you have to do with this, which is you look at the hand, you look at the synergies that are possible. There are a few things that you definitely want. You always want Imbued Axe. It's incredible. You almost always want Anima Extractor, also very good. And I would say we're in a point, again, where keeping the location is very strong, especially with an Acolyte of Pain version. And besides that, you look for combos, right? If you've got Foul Egg plus the Jam Session, that's a game plan, right? Getting the egg rolling early, and then if it gets damaged, that's a great target for Battleworn Faceless. I think of here's a curve thought process for how you just get rolling really, really quickly. Turn 1, Sanguine Depths. Turn 2, Anima Extractor, ping it. Turn 3, play the weapon. If you still have the Extractor, you swing. If you don't swing. And if they killed the Anima Extractor, you've gotten at least 2 hand buffs. Next turn, So turn 4, your location's online again because you pinged on 2, you weaponed on 3, location's online again on 4. You can go Crazed Wretch, ping it, copy with the Battle-Worn Faceless, swing with the weapons, swing with both of those minions. That's a ludicrous amount of damage on turn 4. Like, each of those is 6 or more if the Wretch got any hand buffs. And I think, particularly coming off of the Rifts version, like, this version is much more capable of doing the snowball game plan than the Rift deck was.
Yeah. And I want to point out something really important in that curve scenario. Your axe was not infused in that scenario.
No.
And it's okay. Like, I think that the way that you lose with this deck, and I think the mistake that people make when they start out playing the deck, is that they feel like they have to get value. Like, they feel like they have to hold on to the axe in order to get it infused before you play it. That you need to play Embers after 6, that it's actually a 6-cost card that costs 2. When sometimes Embers on 2 is fine. Embers on 2 with an axe in your hand is actually amazing. It's one of the best plays you can make because it just infuses the axe immediately and then you get the axe online. But getting the axe down is important.
Paladin.
Yeah. Oh yeah, versus the Paladin's great. Just having the bodies in the way. But like, this is a deck that really stretches your fundamentals. You need to use your mana, you need to play your cards. If you are thinking about hero powering, you need to stop and think again, unless you actually are out of cards in your hand to play. Because it's almost always better to play out the cards in your hand than to hold them back in hero power. The exception would probably be if you're playing against something like a Control Priest, right? Where you know that you need to get a big amount of value in order to be able to beat them, because you're not going to beat them with like a couple of small boards. You're going to need a big Grom or a big Remornia or a big Crazed Wretch copy turn or something in order to get through them. Like, that's an exception, but like against most other decks, playing your cards and just finding ways to value, like Egg on 1, Jam Session on 2 is a perfect example. You don't need to get the value out of the Whirlwind. It's fine. Just hit them for 3, right? And if they kill that, then they have another 3/3 to deal with. That's the kind of thing. And like, when you are putting stuff on board, you are making the opponent play your game because they need to remove all of your stuff, because even if you haven't played the axe yet, there's always the threat of it. And if they leave your stuff somewhat damaged, then all of a sudden you have a board that's even harder for them to deal with. So they need to clear your stuff when they can, which means they're not doing what they want to do because they're worried about the things that are hitting them in the face.
Yeah. Even versus a control warrior, if you just wait, they get 1,000,000 armor and then they kill you. You want to be not letting them even think about playing Odin because they're dead if they do it. Right? They don't have a turn off to play an 8/8. I have a screenshot here of a game where it's turn 4 and I have a 2/5 Anima Extractor, a 4/4 Egg, and a 5/4 Steam Guardian and a weapon. I'm about to just ship it all face.
Yeah.
And I floated a mana in that screenshot.
How
and
dare
still
you?
Still had the, that really early pressure board. And this appears to be versus Druid, so, kill them fast or not at all. But I do believe I won that game with that board. This is a deck where most of the time you are playing a proactive deck. You are following the aggro playbook, even if you're not necessarily doing, if you're just going to trickle out minions perfectly into removal, but you have an excellent setup for one of those big turns where you have like 2 Anima Extractors and a Sun Fury Champion and a Jam Session, which leads you into a Light of the Phoenix. And you're not going to die if you wait a turn. Like, wait a turn, you have 6 mana, you can do that. Or 7 mana, you can do that. But in general, you don't want to just sit there waiting for that perfect turn, especially if it's not what your hand is. You have to go with the synergies that are what your hand is and work from there in most matchups.
Yeah. Perfect is the enemy of the good in this deck. This is improv comedy, right? Like, that's what you're like. You are figuring out what you're going to do as you go along. Like, you can set some of this stuff up, but sometimes you're just playing your cards out and then seeing what the deck gives you and then making something work. It's like, it's good to plan ahead, and you should, but also sometimes you can't plan ahead too much, because you just like, if you're planning ahead is causing you to hold stuff back, then you're doing it wrong.
And whichever card draw engine you're playing, you have to play cards to get value out of that. You have to play your Acolyte of Pain to get draw from it, to know what else you can do. Or if you're doing the Roaring Applause version, you think about when you have time for that draw. Play all your stuff, have it all die, and then you have a Roaring Applause that draws you one. But you do have to play stuff to get that, to know what else you can play. This is not a deck where you want to just completely run. You have to be playing things, but you also want to be drawing if you can while you're doing that. Especially if you didn't have the super fast start. So that you can know what you're planning, because you know what you have and what you are able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like with Acolyte of Pain, like, or sometimes Anima Extractor, just play them, right? Like, you don't need to get 4 draws out of Acolyte. It's fine. I promise. Like, if you get...
I buffed it so you can get 2.
Yeah, if you get 2 draws, that's a good result. If you even just get 1, if it just replaces itself, it's fine, right? As long as they're not gonna like Shadow Word Pain's not like, they're not gonna like asphyxiate it, right? If they're gonna asphyxiate it, okay, fine. First of all, if they do that, then they waste an asphyxiate on an Acolyte. You're not upset. But even if they did, then you'd missed out on the card draw, fine. But there isn't that much removal, and like, they don't want to silence a single Acolyte if they're holding like a Starfish or something. Like, they want to silence a whole board after you've buffed it. So like, but playing that forces them to think about that. Like, if they have to like eviscerate it, or use a weapon into it or something, right? Like, those are all resources that they're not going to have for your bigger boards. It's okay. Like, it's you don't, the value you get out of your minions is not just the card text on the minions. It's also what your opponent's using to remove them.
I will say, if your opponent tries to do the thing of, they have an Acolyte of Pain that's damaged and like growing from Imbued Axe, I'm gonna overdraw them. Don't worry about it. Don't stress.
It's fine.
Like,
if they're overdrawing you, you're fine, because you don't usually have that many cards in your hand to begin with.
Yeah. Odds are you're gonna like more of what you're getting out of it than you are worried about the things that you're burning. It's possible that you will draw all your card draw and burn the things you wanted to see, but that is pretty unlikely. And mostly you should just be happy that they're keeping your hand full, so that eventually you can, assemble something to murder them.
Yeah.
But it also means you've got an Acolyte of Pain that's been getting buffed by your weapon and should be hitting them. So
yeah, and like, I can't tell you like the number, because I've done a fair number of coaching sessions on different versions of this deck over the last few months. I cannot tell you how many times someone said, I would never have thought of playing Embers of Strength on 2. Right? Like, it's just, that's the difference, right? It's like, because I'm like, let's just play Embers here, it's fine. Like, I would never have thought of playing them as 1/2s, right? But they're still 2 bodies. They're still infusing your axe. They're still just like bodies that you can damage, that you can buff with an uninfused axe if you need to. Like, I'm not saying you do it every time, right? Like, obviously it's better later if you can combine it with a Thorible, or you can combine it with a Sunfury champion, but you can't always do that. And if your choice is play Embers of Strength or Hero Power, play Embers. Yeah. Just get bodies on board.
Power ever.
Yeah.
There was that Druid card that we used to play, which made the 2/1/2 turtles.
Yeah,
that was a great card. We played that card. That didn't have Mana Thirst 6.
It was a nature spell, but yeah.
We also had Herald of Nature. We had Herald of Nature in that deck too, which made it a little bit better to play it on 2, because you wanted to Herald Nature on 3. But the point is still valid.
The threat is still similar.
Yeah.
So like, you got to do a little bit more work than just, okay, Herald of Nature is juiced. Now these 1/2s are threatening board buff. But Axe is similarly a buff of +1/+2. It just requests that your minions be damaged. And that's still possible with, something like Sunfury around. Crispy Skipper, right? That if you equip an Axe, there's the possibility that you'll, jam session a minion and then buff those 1/2 taunts into like real minions or something like that. And yeah, if the worst case is they do some early trades that get killed off, and then you get to play an infused Axon curve. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The axe is very strong, and it doesn't need to do the entire board. You know, and it has 3 hits. You have 2 of them. You know, you don't generally want to swing for not buffing anything unless you really need to kill something on the other side of the board that has 2 health for some reason, which I have done. But you don't have to save every swing for the ideal board.
Again, if it's a choice between between equipping an uninfused axe or pressing the button, play the uninfused axe, right? Like, obviously, is it what you want to do? No, but you need to get that weapon down. And I think that's the other thing that people don't necessarily think about, is that the weapon has to be equipped in order to be able to make the snowball board. And that's 3 mana that you need to find time to spend. That's effectively tempo negative. So, you know, I mean, obviously you can swing into something, you can remove something, but like, there are times when you just need to get the weapon on board to be able to set things up, and you need to find times to fit that in. You can't always do that when you're busy building boards and stuff like that. So like, even if it's uninfused, like, you still get the health buff whether or not it's infused, which is actually the more important part of it, because that means that they're more likely to get buffed again because they're still damaged, right? So like, the extra attack is fine, but the health buff is there regardless of whether it's infused or not. And that's actually the really important part. So, you know, would you prefer to infuse it if you can? Sure, but you don't have to. And again, that's getting enough value versus getting all the value is the difference between winning and losing with this deck.
I probably worried not enough about infused. I like almost never worry about whether it's infused. I'm just like, I have 3 mana to play this axe, I'm playing it. You know, if you can order it so that you infuse it, you have something else to do with your 3 mana, then you'll have it infused. You should probably think about it more than I do, but I, you know, have a 70% win rate with this, and I barely think about it. We wanted to quickly run through some of the matchups to wrap this up. So, you know, as we were saying, Ramp Druid is not particularly what you want to see, but I was saying the way that matchup goes depends partly on your rank, because it is, you know, the in general, the Ramp Druid has a higher win rate at higher MMRs, but it's not, you know, so it ranges from, say, like a 46% win rate for you down to maybe like a 42%. Obviously not what you want to see, but in Rage Warrior, even at places where Ramp Druid is just rampant, it still has a positive win rate right now. And overall on ladder, a really, really high win rate. And many of the decks that are trying to counter the Druids, you do have a good win rate into. So if you are facing a Druid, first of all, you could think about that World 8 list, really try to tech it if that really is like mainly what you're seeing. You definitely need to go fast in that matchup. Get your Crazed Wretches going. Get that Foul Egg with the Jam Session on it on 2, shipping it face. And yeah, if you keep making boards, then they can't sit around and draw cards as much. You want to make it so that when they play Nourish on 5, they're not dealing with your stuff. I mean, then they get 2 full mana crystals back, but they only have 2 mana crystals to deal with your stuff instead of 5. So you're making it hard for them to do what they want to do as leisurely as possible. Any other thoughts about the sort of more combo matchups?
I mean, pretty much just hit them hard, hit them fast. Like, if you can go Egg Jam Session, if you can make a copy of it, location is generally going to be very strong, because whatever you throw down, you're going to be able to buff it to attack. Weapon obviously is your best snowball card. You do need to have something to go with it, but you know, I love to see, you know, Foul Leg Location, Foul Leg Jam Session, get the weapon now. Like, that's where you would love to have the curve of location into something on 2 that you can ping, into weapon, into 2/2 drops on 4. Like, whatever you can do to get rolling. And then if you are running the World 8 version or something like that, obviously posit great on 4 or great whenever you can just make it super awkward, right? Like that Nourish turn, or just if you fill their hand, it's harder for them to draw cards, and they don't want to take time to play those 3/3s. So, and the
same thing with Speaker Stomper too. Like,
yeah,
Speaker
I
Stomper.
would do. It's either you do the turn that they're going to nourish, so you slow down the nourish, or the turn after when they're going to play a bunch of stuff. Usually you want to slow down the nourish.
They run Innervate. They have if they have coin, then you can just slam it on curve, right? Because like they have ways to play it on 5, and if you try to time that too much, sometimes you just end up whiffing. And even then, right? Like even like Solar Blossom is enough to just end your game. Right, which is even if they don't nourish. So,
for some of the, other more sort of burn focused deck like Rainbow Mage, it's like a 60% matchup for Enrage. If you are seeing that, I haven't seen a lot of it. Arcane Hunter is also close to 60% favored for the Enraged Warrior. You just want to make sure they don't get you really low while you're getting set up. You're forcing them to put some of their damage into your minions, for example. Once in a while, I will find like keeping their hidden meaning off for a turn if I have some plan. Like, you have to think about, if I'm delaying their hidden meaning, is that because it's actually better for me if it goes off later? As someone who's played a lot of the Arcane Hunter, if I have nothing else going on but hidden meanings, then it can be aggravating when my opponent just doesn't let it happen, but not at the expense of not playing your imbued axe, so that can be the right play only if there's some reason why it's better for you.
Yeah, like you generally, like, you're giving them a 3-drop, but like if you're not giving them a 3-drop at the expense of passing turn and you have cards to play, just play them. Like, it's going to be better if they have to trade off your minions than whatever. Right, and your minions that you're playing at that stage of the game are usually 4 health anyway, so they're going to live through a lot of 3-drops without them helping it along, like with bananas or something like that. So just like, you might get screwed, it happens, but I would just I would try to not play around hidden meaning unless you already have a good line that's going to still be tempo positive while floating a mana.
And that's usually not the case. And you can remember, if you're playing against like a paladin, your whirlwind effects will clear their stuff as well. So you want to do that in such a way that it helps you keep the board, not that you're sitting back letting them get the board and then trying to play catch up, so much as you play your like 1-2 taunts and then they boogie down, and then you jam session one of your 1-2 taunts and help clear what they just did and go face. So, and if you do get really behind, then you can try to set up if you have one of your big turns when you're dealing damage to the whole board, that also deals damage to their board. But mostly against something like an aggro paladin, you're a little slower to get on the board. You're using it to catch you up back on the board quickly as possible. And that's also a good matchup.
And Sun Fury can just kind of help you swing the board pretty hard. Yeah. Like there was one game I think that they had they'd gone like really wide with dudes, and I just went like Sun Fury, fire spell, and they conceded. So on like 4, because they just like gone so wide, and I just wiped out everything, and I still had a board behind it. Like, okay, we don't need to play this game anymore. So yeah.
I'll wait maybe like 1 turn for a better, like if they just like have like 1 dude up, I won't whirlwind it. But
same
again,
things with the
tons of value.
Same as with the 4/1s from Hunter, right? Like you can use the Sun Fury to deal with those and still develop board at the same time.
Yeah. The thing that is good against Druid is going wider usually, which is why I think Pure has shifted in part towards this like recruits build. I mean, also because Crusader's Aura is just a disgusting card, but Druids right now with Rake are pretty good at dealing with like a couple of, middle-sized minions in up to like, 4 health. sometimes more with, a pounce or harmonic, etc. So a lot of these aggro decks are like, okay, so we get a bunch of stuff, and then, some of it's going to stick around in Weak Crusaders or whatever. And we get to be the thing that says, oh, you want to get a bunch of smaller stuff? Okay, let's make that go away.
Yeah.
Sun Fury plus Jam Session in particular can be a great just like consecrate effect, right? You just do 2 damage to everything. Maybe you then have a yep. So that can be very effective. You just want to make sure that you're not blowing that stuff too early.
Yeah. And then against control, you want to be trying to get big value out of the Anima Extractors usually. Like you don't have to, like you can pressure them also and just keep making them remove boards, but generally you're looking for a way to, you don't want to tempo the Anima Extractors usually against a control deck. You usually want to try to get some sort of like a Sun Fury Embrace or Embers Extractor turn, or something where you're copying the Anima Extractor and then whirlwinding or whatever, right? Like you want to be hitting a Grom, you want to be hitting a Remornia, you want to be hitting an Olgra. Those things are all pretty helpful for getting through. And don't forget about the face damage that Olgra does, by the way. That is often significant, and as long as the Olgra is going to survive, like it's sometimes worth like using your location on opposing minions or whatever, if all your minions are damaged, to get a little bit extra damage on the Olgra in order to get a little bit more face damage in and be able to clear some more.
Yeah, Olgra definitely can be a powerful base minion, and I would say it depends partly on what control. If you're facing control priest, you definitely need to get some value going. If you're facing a control warrior, you have to kind of balance. You want some value, but you also don't have as much time necessarily. And if you are facing Chadlock, is not a great matchup because we really can't deal with their flesh behemoth terrain.
But sometimes
it's the same reason. It's the same thing as like with Drum Druid, right? We can't deal with board in a box, like these just huge big boards out of nowhere. Like we can do a few rounds of 1 damage to everything and trade our stuff in, but it does take us some time to build up. So Drum Druid, similarly to Chadlock, is just like, hey, look, I have 4 or 5 4/6 taunts. I think it's 5, and we're like, okay, well, I guess I didn't kill you fast enough.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's why ENR is such a problem too, right? Because of the 5/5s.
Yeah, the 5/5s with taunts are really impactful there. But again, they're not impossible matchups by any means. And so if you know it's a Chadlock as opposed to a control warlock, you do need to turn on the pressure a little bit to try to kill them.
And in general, I think it's going to be safe to kind of do the snowball hand. I mean, even against something like a priest, if I put my pedal on the gas to force out Shard, and then that means that I can go Acolyte, Sanguine Depths, and now they don't have silence for my card draw engine. Like sometimes that is gonna help you out. Like I think putting on pressure is just the most important thing if you can manage it. But that's gonna do it, and we have a whole lot here in the show notes, so definitely use the show notes as a reference. I think it's a great resource that is now very, very detailed. So we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at coinandseed.com, where you can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live on Twitch by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. And write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede, as well as like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. If you'd like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Kresh, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottlecaps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Forgiven One, Enraged Chicken, and Grizzly Bear. And then I'm going to coin concede to you, Megasa, for this incredible deep dive into Enraged Warrior. For those who have not been seeing the show notes, Nagisa has taken it upon herself to be our sort of writer on the show, and she does an awesome job. I feel bad because I often have to like cut things short because there's just so much good stuff there, and we just don't have time to talk about everything. But if you want to look back at just quick reference, so you don't have to like re-listen to this part of the podcast with explanations over and over to get all that info. If you're just wanting those resources while you're playing on the ladder, I say definitely take a look at the show notes so you can have that quick reference guide of like mulligans, matchups, all that stuff, some data from Nature's Replay. It's all there. It's really, really great.
Thank you. And also, thanks, Wicked, for adding a bunch of info into it. Don't feel bad about keeping us on track for not taking 2 hours every time, at least. And it's something that I find really helpful, even if I don't end up saying everything, to have my thoughts out. And sometimes it's more detailed than other times, but and if the notes can be helpful to other people besides just me, then that's awesome. And I feel like, I'm not doing the tech, and I'm not doing the audio editing, and this is a way that I can contribute. I want to coin concede to my mom, who is living her best life on vacation right now. She has said for, I think, as long as I can remember, there's been this running gag of how she wants to go to the Galapagos and see the blue-footed boobies, which is a bird with very blue feet. It is both like the dumbest looking thing and very photogenic at the same time. So she is there, and she sent me a photo of her like 2 feet away from one of these birds, and also one of the bird just looking very derpy and yet very regal at the same time. I put it in the show notes, the picture of this bird. So coin concede to my mom for finally achieving her dream, and she's just having a great time in general. So
I definitely thought that was a statue.
It is a real bird.
All right, Wicked.
Well, I'm going to coin concede. I don't remember exactly who it was, but I'm going to coin concede to whoever it was in Lorinda's chat the other day who told me that I don't look like I'm 44, because that was a very nice thing to hear. Because I think people think I'm a little bit younger than I am, which, autism does that. But yeah, it was a nice thing to hear. And also to Schwal and Steven Sensei, who have continued to keep their podcast at close to 30 minutes on average, which,
wow.
After I gave them a bunch of crap about how they had a 50-minute episode when they started out saying they were 30 minutes or less. So they have managed to do that. So I am very proud of them, because that is not something that we are able to do on this show, not even close.
This is a shorter one.
This is a shorter one, and we're going to keep it short. So in the spirit of keeping things short, keep calm and just play your cards. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Okay. Wow, we kept it under 2 hours. Look at us.
Look at us.
That's like proportionally the size of Play for Tempo. I'm sure that's
right now.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks everybody for coming out and hanging out with us as always. Really appreciate it. Do tell a friend if you haven't. I think a lot of people think that everybody knows us, and I think there's a lot of people who don't. So, spread the word if you can. Be helpful. I should say that on the show, I forgot about it, but these are the true believers here. So
I can add it to the intro.
Yeah. But I think have we raided Sway recently? I don't think we have.
I don't believe so. Yeah.
All right, let's raid Sway. So we're gonna raid Sway. Sway plays Battleground. She's awesome. Go hang out with her. We'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And have a great night, everybody.
Have a great night.
Night.
Thanks, everyone.
Or in 10 seconds, because I forget every time that there's a 10-second countdown from when you press the button. So I'm just going to keep talking until I can press the button again. And there we go. Bye, everybody. Night.